So we would do this again and again. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you're coming from a greater distance though,
Yeah.
the increase in price is going to have less of an effect on your, make less of an effect on your decision to come versus if you're already like there
Yep.
and you have to pay extra, right? Because you're probably have more money.
Yep.
Or you're, you know, you've made more of an investment to come already, so an extra, even if it was, you know, for the rainforest, even if it was an extra $1,000. If
Yeah.
you're already coming from, you know, China, you probably can,
Yeah, it's nothing, right?
you know, it's probably not as big of a,
Percentage.
versus if you're, you know, or
Yeah.
only have to drive 500 kilometers or something like that.
You're exactly right. There are a lot of things that you have to consider. So the farther you come, quite often there's economies of scale too, right? If I can actually fly to Europe cheaper than I can fly up north. So to fly to Uranium City right now costs a couple of $1,000s. To fly to Sweden in 3 weeks costs something like $1,500. So you have economies of scale in terms of travel costs as well. And that should, you know, that violates the assumptions that we made in the beginning. So there are statistical techniques to be able to deal with that, and you want to set up the experiment, the travel cost experiment, to be able to adjust for those types of things. But you bring up a really good point, because you have to be aware of these things. If you're not, and you just sit down and do a survey, you're going to get crappy information. The same with multiple destinations. You know, another $1,000 to visit, you go to the rainforest and then you hop over and go to the Andes and then do the Inca Trail, and those added costs are not going to be much. And so what can we capture the true value of the particular resource?
And what about too, like if you increase the price, it might increase like the awareness of that site, so it might actually increase the demand for it. Like people might not know about, say, the sandhills, so
Yeah.
when there's this outrage because they're going to be charging money for it, and people are like, "Yep, I've never heard of that," and then
Yeah.
it might increase actually.
So there's two things about that. One, this is the cost, the value of a particular time. So if your point is well taken in that you would do this and then you'd go back a year later and see what happened. The other point you make is important in that you live right here, right? You can go there anytime you like. All of a sudden now you gotta pay $30. You're gonna be pissed right off. But we're calculating information to give to policymakers. And in the case of the rainforest, the demand curve that they came up with looked like this. So what does this mean? Here we've got, you know, fewer visitors, but they're paying, you know, $100,000. That's their willingness to pay to visit some of these sites. Go to the Amazon, they save up their whole lives. Down here, you've got people who live in it, and you're talking like 40 cents. Because you're dealing with different cultures, different incomes, different sets of values. And people live here. So, you know, if we come up with, okay, well, people want to go there, let's really reduce the damage to this ecosystem. Say, you got to pay $10,000 to get in. That's it, you know. It's a highly valuable ecosystem. What do you do to the local people? That doesn't make sense from a policy perspective. So you can talk about local people paying a little bit or nothing, and then having, you live in the country, you're a national, you pay a different fee. You're a foreign visitor, and we provide extra services or something, you pay a huge fee. So you can capture all of this rent, all of the consumer surplus for that country and that resource to be able to protect that ecosystem. So it's the information we're trying to gather. What we do with it is a different story. Where else do they do this? We have demand curves like this. Where else do we charge people different prices?
Tickets.
Movie tickets. If you're a student or you're a child, do students pay less? Or do you guys have to pay adult fees? So if you're a kid or an old person, you pay down here. If you're somebody else, you pay up here. Okay. Okay, so are there any questions about if we do this again, what am I going to do? I'm going to erase the cost, erase the visitors, erase the percent participation. Now I increase the price to $60, and what do I get? This becomes 70, this becomes 100, this becomes 130, so it goes up again. At $70, we expect 2%, so the participation rate drops. 2% of this population goes down, and then so on and so on. So each time you do that, you sum the numbers here, and then you calculate where we are on this graph, and you wind up with a sort of chunky looking demand curve. Okay? I don't need to go through this again, right? It's like flogging a dead horse. Shouldn't say that, I don't even like that. So, who cares? When we get we've sort of talked about it already, what you can do with the information. So we've got this demand curve where we have, what do we have here? There's one person, and then 0, and 0, 1, 1503, 3754, and 6365. And we go from 0 to 30, 60, 90, is that what I was doing? Yeah. And then 120. So this is where it zeroes out. Here we've got one person. Here we've got 60. This is 30, and this is 0. So you have a demand curve that kind of looks like the one we just had up here with long skinny tails on both sides. Like, who cares? What are you going to do with the information? Back up one step. What kind of information can we calculate from this? What do we get? Go right back to where we were in the first couple of weeks. This is where we're at, right? Price is actually 0. These are hypothetical prices.
Possible revenues? Possible revenues?
Possible revenues, yeah. If I wanted to charge $120, I know revenue would be 0.
Consumer surplus.
Yeah. We know that for a fact that the price is 0. This is what we have, 6,365 people a year maybe. If we wanted to estimate the total value of this resource, we basically are calculating the consumer surplus. So we know that there's 1 or 2 or a few people willing to pay between $90 and $120 a year, if that's the time frame we chose. We know, just based on the extrapolation and the value, the cost, the willingness to pay for travel to get to this site, that the value is going to fall, but there are some people up here. So we would estimate this value by consumer surplus in this case equals total value equals the area under the curve. So if we had a whole database, we could just do some calculations and figure out what that is. What this looks like in this case is this area plus this area plus this area. So all of these, what do they call these? I don't know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So if we took all these areas, you could calculate, these big chunks all at one. And then these triangles. If you just took 120 times 1/2 of 6,365, you would grossly overestimate the consumer surplus because you'd be calculating this area in here. So this becomes it can become very tedious because you might increase the price from 0 to $1 to $2 to $3 and keep going. And then you would calculate each of those areas separately. So basically what I calculated was consumer surplus equals $253,215. That's what we get for the value of that resource. based on that survey at that time under those economic conditions. Okay. So this, if we're talking of public good and public resource and federal or provincial management, they might want to know that this resource has this value. They might want to promote it in terms of tourism. They might want to charge a fee to people who are willing to pay a little bit more so that they could restore areas or I don't know, make a better parking lot or put up toilets or whatever. Okay? So the information would be, the decisions made based on this information would reflect social values or political values or whatever. Okay? Remember, we're estimating a non-market value. There's no market for it right now because typically these things are public type goods or open access type goods. So the government quite often has a hand in the management of these things. Okay. Any questions about that? Why you use it? Why it's important? If you choose travel cost method, I don't expect you to come up with all the tables and the numbers and the estimates. I would think that, you know, if you were going to estimate something like this, or you're going to use this for your proposal, you would select the site and then talk about the steps and maybe be a little bit specific. You know, if I was going to have this particular zone, say we're going to estimate the value of, I don't know, Pike Lake or something. So think about how far you might go with the zones and what the implications of the information are. How could you use the data? Why might it be important? So I'm more concerned with, do you understand the method and why it's important? Why is probably number one. And how you might use it and to whom is it important. Okay? Yeah, you don't need to go out and do all kinds of calculations and come up with some phony numbers and stuff. Because there's no point in doing that. It's just a waste of time. Okay. The other one I've got on here is discrete models and choice experiments. This is a lot, I don't think I'm going to go over it. There's a lot, it's very similar to hedonic method, the hedonic method. And for the hedonic method, it's indirect. You observe people's choices, and you have values. So if you look at this table on the notes, don't get excited because I'm not done yet, even though I said I'm not going to go over this. You can see you need prices, and then you develop these scenarios and do a survey to basically do the same thing. Tease out the value of those attributes. So it's quite similar to the hedonic method. Okay. I just have one more module, I guess, and it's financial analysis. What I'm going to do is I'll post a little rubric or a chart of the different equations that you use, and then I'll go over this. I'll probably cover this whole thing. What's today? Thursday? Next Tuesday, and then that's it for me lecturing, and then it's you guys. So, and it's not that bad actually. So I would like you to speak for 45 minutes to an hour and leave time for questions afterwards. Like I said, you can use YouTube videos. Don't use a 45-minute YouTube video. I've got one today about, I thought it was kind of funny, so I'm going to load that up in a second. And then I want you to get in your groups just for a few minutes, in case you don't even know each other at this point, and talk about how you might go forward. And so do that in here, because I want to come around and talk to each of you, and then that's it. But I'm just going to